The radio crackles, the world listens, and a single sentence changes the entire narrative of a Sunday afternoon. Am I a guinea pig? That's not a line from a dramatic movie. That is Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, asking his team a question that cuts right to the bone of a multi-million-dollar operation. He arrived at the Dutch Grand Prix with a very specific request, a demand really, and what happened over the next few hours is a masterclass in how high performance can unravel in real time. It isn't about a crash and it isn't about a mechanical failure. It is about a gap, a terrifyingly wide gap, between the words spoken in a press conference and the reality of a racetrack. We have to go back to the beginning of the weekend, because that is where the irony begins to simmer. Ferrari rolled into Zandvoort with a genuinely heavy air of expectation. This wasn't just another race, it was the first race of the second half of the season, the moment where teams prove they can adapt and fight. They brought with them a massive upgrade package. We're talking about a brand new floor, a reworked diffuser, and a revised beam wing. This is the third major aerodynamic push of the season, a signal that the development war is far from over. The 7-time champion stood in front of the media and said something that, looking back, feels almost like a prophecy. He talked about the team being buoyed up. He praised the belief in the garage, the focus, the atmosphere. He said he couldn't ask for any more from the team. But then he paused, and he added the caveat that was supposed to define the rest of the year. He said, quote, "We've just got to, in the second half of the season, try to execute better." That word, execute, is a loaded word in Formula One. It implies that the speed exists, that the car exists, but that the human layer, the decision-making layer, is somehow failing. It is one thing to say this behind closed doors. It is another to say it on the record right before you step into a car that you know is capable of fighting for a podium. The belief was there. The new parts were there. The stage was set for Ferrari to prove that the summer break had sharpened their operational edge. But what happens when the driver asks for something and the team simply cannot deliver it? That is the central question hanging over this video, and the answer is far more complicated than just saying Ferrari messed up. It reveals a fundamental disconnect in the way information is handled, and it sets the stage for one of the most revealing radio exchanges of the season. The qualifying session should have been the first warning sign. If you look at the raw data, the SF26 was not a slow car at Zandvoort. In fact, as the weekend progressed, it became clear that their race pace was superior to some of the teams that finished ahead of them. But in qualifying, that urgency, that execution simply wasn't visible. Hamilton slotted in 5th, and Leclerc was right behind him in 6th. They were over 3 tenths off the pole time. On a track like Zandvoort, where overtaking is notoriously difficult, starting 5th and 6th is not a death sentence, but it absolutely puts you on the back foot. It forces the strategy team into a reactive mode rather than a proactive one. It creates a scenario where a driver has to push harder in dirty air, burning up tires just to stay in contention. However, the narrative shifts dramatically on race day. The long-run pace of that Ferrari was real. It was genuine. Suddenly, Hamilton and Leclerc weren't just fighting for points, they were fighting for a podium. And this is where the execution problem that Hamilton flagged before the weekend began to manifest itself in the most painful way possible. The issue wasn't the engine, and it wasn't the downforce. The issue was the clock, the pit wall, and a terrible, crippling silence. Imagine you're Lewis Hamilton. You're stuck behind your teammate. You're on newer tires. You can see the race slipping away because the team is hesitating. You know you're faster. You know you have the grip to make a move. But the voice in your ear is telling you to hold position or isn't telling you anything at all. The frustration builds. It moves from a request to a demand. "I am faster than him," he says. The response is not swift. The seconds tick by. In Formula One, a second of indecision is an eternity. By the time the call is made, the opportunity has evaporated. The podium that was within reach starts to fade. This isn't just about a single race, though. This is about a pattern. Lewis Hamilton is not a driver who enjoys losing time. He spent his entire career fighting for championships, and he knows that a single point can decide a title. To see a potential podium finish slip away not because of a lack of speed, but because of a lack of decisiveness is the ultimate trigger for a competitor of his caliber. The anger we heard on the radio wasn't just angry, it was diagnostic. He wasn't simply swearing at the clouds or complaining about bad luck. He was pinpointing the exact moment where the race was being lost. Am I a guinea pig? He asked this because the strategy being applied to his race felt nonsensical to the man inside the car. He was being left out on aging rubber while his rivals, particularly Lando Norris and Kimi Antonelli, were closing in on him with fresher tires. From his perspective, looking in those mirrors, it felt like the team was using him as an experiment to see how long the hard compound could last rather than fighting for the best possible finishing position. That is a terrifying feeling for a driver. It means the team has shifted their priority from your result to a data collection exercise. But here is where the story gets layers. Fred Vasseur, the Ferrari team principal, offered an explanation after the race, and it is one of the most fascinating pieces of this entire puzzle. He claimed that the team was deliberately withholding strategic information over the radio. Why would they do that? Because of the threat of espionage. In the modern era of Formula One, with teams constantly monitoring each other's radio communications, Vasseur argued that if Ferrari had told Hamilton the exact plan, why he was staying out, what the target lap time was, what the undercut gap was, that information would have been heard by Mercedes, by McLaren, by Red Bull. In the hyper-competitive world of strategy, teams can react to a radio message within seconds. If Ferrari said, "Lewis, we are going to lap 40, Mercedes would know exactly when to pit their drivers to counter the move. This creates a brutal paradox. You have a driver in the car who is dealing with an information vacuum. He doesn't know why he is being kept out. He doesn't know if the team has a master plan or if they have simply frozen under pressure. He is asking for guidance, asking for a decision, and the pit wall is giving him radio silence in the name of operational security. This is a high-stakes gamble. On one hand, you protect your secrets from your rivals. On the other, you erode the trust of your star driver. Vasseur's explanation makes logical sense from a cold, strategic standpoint, but it fails to account for the human element, the psychological need of a driver to believe that the people on the wall are in control. If you leave a driver in the dark, he will assume the worst. He will assume incompetence. He will assume he is being sacrificed. It is crucial to look at the contrast here. Hamilton pointed out the efficiency of Mercedes after the race. He watched George Russell and Kimi Antonelli execute a perfect strategic dance to secure a double podium for the Silver Arrows. When there was a decision to be made between those two cars, Mercedes made it. They didn't hide behind the fear of people listening in. They communicated, they executed, and they reaped the rewards. For Lewis, who spent the majority of his career inside that Mercedes machine, where operational perfection was the baseline, the contrast must have been jarring. He has moved from an environment where the strategy team is known for ruthless efficiency to an environment where, at least on this day, the communication strategy was to say nothing. It suggests a lack of confidence, a scared approach to racing, where the team is more worried about what the opposition might do than what their own driver is experiencing. The final result of the race reflects this tangled web of issues. Hamilton finished 4th. Leclerc finished 5th. On paper, that's a solid points haul for the Constructors' Championship. But context is everything. The pace of the car was good enough for the podium. Fred Vasseur himself admitted that the pace was better than Mercedes. That means the personnel on the pit wall left points on the table. That is the execution failure Hamilton was talking about. It wasn't just that they made a mistake, it was that they made a mistake by refusing to communicate, which led to a driver making decisions without full information. When Hamilton says the time lost behind Leclerc cost him a podium, he isn't speculating, he's doing the math. Every lap spent in the dirty air of another Ferrari while waiting for an order that never came was a lap where the gap to the frontrunners grew. And there was another layer to the chaos, a slow pit stop. It's a classic Ferrari trope, the stuff of memes and heartbreak for the Tifosi, but it's a real mechanical truth. In a sport measured in hundreds of a second, a gun sticking or a wheel nut failing can eliminate any advantage the car has. When you combine a slow stop with a confusing radio strategy, you get a race that feels chaotic even from the outside. It looks like the team is fighting itself. The driver is fighting the car, the pit wall is fighting the stopwatch, and the team is fighting the clock. The
The tension on the radio, the public frustration of Hamilton, it wasn't just the heat of the moment, though that certainly played a part. It was the sound of a professional realizing that the organization around him is not functioning at the level required to win. You don't win 7 world championships by being patient with mediocrity. You win them by demanding excellence at every single turn. When that excellence is absent, when the communication breaks down, the frustration is going to be explosive. And while the race ended, the story was just beginning to heat up. What happens after the helmets come off is often more revealing than what happens inside the cockpit. The immediate post-race interviews are raw, unfiltered moments. Lewis Hamilton didn't hide his feelings. He stood there, race suit soaked, and he was blunt. He stated clearly that the time lost behind Leclerc cost him a podium. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't use
the corporate PR speak that so often sanitizes the sport. He was disappointed, and he wanted everyone to know why. But that wasn't the end of it. In the digital age, the story continues on social media, and that is where the narrative took an unexpected turn. Days after the race, Hamilton posted a message on Instagram. This was not a legal disclaimer or a forced apology. It was a moment of self-reflection from a 41-year-old athlete who has lived long enough to know that his words carry weight. He admitted that he had listened back to the radio messages and his TV interviews. He acknowledged that the heat of the moment had gotten the better of him. He said, quote, "That wasn't the best version of me. I take responsibility for that, and I'll be better." This is a significant statement. It shows a level of self-awareness that separates a veteran from a rookie. He wasn't saying his frustration wasn't justified. He was saying the way he expressed that frustration wasn't the standard he holds himself to. But here is the tension. He also added that the direction is clear and the fight is absolutely still on. So how do we read this? Is this a driver backing down from his criticism? Is he smoothing things over to keep the peace inside the garage? Or is this a calculated move by a master politician to reposition himself as the unifying leader while still holding the team accountable? I believe it is the latter. Lewis Hamilton knows the cameras are always on. By acknowledging his own tone, he neutralizes the media narrative that might try to paint him as a toxic influence or a driver who is losing his cool. He takes the moral high ground. He says, I was emotional, I was wrong for the tone, but the core issue, the execution, that remains true. It is a masterclass in crisis management. He is showing that he can be critical and committed at the same time. This brings us back to the beginning of the weekend. Remember what he said about the team being buoyed up? He praised the belief. He praised the progress. This is why the disappointment is so sharp. If the car was terrible, if the team was in disarray, the expectations will be lower. But the car is good. The team, according to Hamilton, has a great atmosphere. That is why the failure to execute is so maddening. It is one thing to lose because you're slow. It's another thing entirely to lose because you're unorganized. The disparity between the internal atmosphere and the on-track results creates a cognitive dissonance that is very hard to manage. Let's look deeper at Fred Vasseur's role in all of this. He's a pragmatic leader. He admitted the mistakes. He pointed to Leclerc's poor second start, the slow pit stop, and the miscommunication with Hamilton. He didn't hide from the truth. But this is not the first time he's had to make these admissions. Before the summer break at the Hungarian Grand Prix, Vasseur described Ferrari's execution as very poor. That is a recurring theme. It's a broken record. When a leader constantly has to admit that the operational side of the team is failing, at what point does the admission itself become a problem? It suggests that despite all the advancements in the car, despite the new hires and the new culture, the fundamental issue of making quick, correct decisions under pressure remains unresolved. The guinea pig comment is the key to this entire race from a psychological standpoint. When a driver uses that phrase, he's expressing a deep sense of alienation. He feels like a test subject rather than a driver. He feels like the team is prioritizing the collection of long-term data over the immediate necessity of a podium finish. In the cutthroat world of Formula One, where drivers are often seen as little more than high-speed employees, this comment struck a chord. It made people realize that even for a 7-time champion, the feeling of being out of the loop, of not knowing why you're being asked to do something, is terrifying.
And look at Leclerc's position in all of this. He finished behind Hamilton, but he was not the target of the anger. The tension on the radio was about the team's indecision, not Leclerc's driving. Hamilton was frustrated that he was stuck behind him, yes, but he understood that Leclerc was just doing his job. The problem was that the pit wall wasn't doing theirs. This is a delicate dynamic. You have two alpha drivers, both extremely fast, both hungry for success. If the team cannot manage the interplay between them cleanly, if they hesitate on team orders, they don't just lose one position, they lose the trust of both drivers. Leclerc is also watching this happen. He's seeing how Hamilton is being managed, and he is surely thinking, will that be me next week? The management of these two egos is a tightrope walk, and Ferrari is currently wobbling. If we zoom out from the specifics of Zandvoort, this race serves as a case study in the difference between having a fast car and having a winning operation. Lewis Hamilton has spent the last few years transitioning from an era of total dominance to an era of intense competition. He knows that margins are thinner than ever. In an era where the top four teams, McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari, are often separated by mere tenths of a second, the human element becomes the deciding factor. The cars are almost equal. The engines are almost equal. The difference between winning and finishing fourth is almost always the strategy and the execution. Hamilton's demand for better execution wasn't a technical request, it was a cultural one. He is trying to instill a mindset. He is trying to tell the team, we are fast enough
to win. So we need to start acting like winners. Winners are decisive. Winners are clear. Winners do not leave their drivers hanging on the radio. Winners do not have drivers asking if they are being used as guinea pigs. This is where the true value of a champion driver reveals itself. It is not just about steering the car. It's about dragging an organization forward. It's about setting a standard and refusing to accept anything less. But there is a fine line between demanding excellence and creating tension. The tone of the radio messages is always a topic of debate. Some fans love the raw emotion. They want to hear the passion. Others cringe. They feel it undermines the team. Hamilton's subsequent Instagram post suggests he's aware of that fine line. He knows that while his frustration was valid, the public nature of the outburst can sometimes do more harm than good. It can spook the engineers. It can make the strategists second-guess themselves even more, which is the last thing Ferrari needs. If the team is already struggling to make decisions, the fear of being yelled at by the superstar driver might make them freeze up even more. There is a leadership aspect to being a driver, and Hamilton is actively navigating that right now. We also have to consider the physical and mental toll of the season. We are deep into the second half. The calendar is brutal. The travel is exhausting. The pressure is immense. When you're tired, your patience wears thin. When you're tired, you're more likely to snap on the radio. This doesn't excuse the tone, but it explains it. Hamilton is not a young man by Formula One standards. He's a 41-year-old athlete who is still competing at the absolute peak of the sport. That requires an immense amount of energy. To see that energy being wasted because of a communication breakdown is frustrating on a level that is hard to articulate unless you're in the car. Let's talk about the technical side of the upgrade package. Ferrari brought a new floor, a new diffuser, and a new beam wing. This is not a small tweak. This is a fundamental change to how the car generates downforce. In the world of ground effect cars, the floor is everything. It's the secret sauce. When you bring a new floor, you are trying to unlock a new level of performance. The drivers reported that the car felt strong, but the correlation between the wind tunnel and the track is always a mystery. Sometimes you bring an upgrade and the car is a rocket ship. Sometimes it's a diva that is impossible to set up. The fact that the Ferrari had such strong race pace suggests the upgrade is working. This is crucial for the rest of the season. It means the engineers are on the right track. It means the car is evolving. But this makes the execution failure even more painful. Imagine you're a chef. You finally perfect a recipe. You have the best ingredients, you have the best kitchen, but your waiters keep dropping the plates before they get to the table. That's what Ferrari is doing. The engineering department is delivering a Michelin star car, and the operations department is letting it down. That's why Hamilton's frustration is so profound. He can feel the potential. He can feel the podium. It's right there in his hands, but it slips away because of a process failure that has nothing to do with speed.
Looking ahead, the immediate implications for the Constructors' Championship is massive. Ferrari is fighting for points. They're fighting against the resurgent Mercedes and a dominant McLaren. Every point counts. Leaving a podium on the table in Zandvoort might not seem like a big deal in August, but when the season ends in December, that lost ground could be the difference between second and fourth place. That translates into millions of dollars in prize money, and more importantly, credibility going into the next season. The momentum of a team is a fragile thing. A podium finish creates energy. A fourth-place finish leaves a sour taste. Ferrari cannot afford to keep leaving sour tastes in the mouths of their drivers. The conversation around Hamilton is often polarized. You have the fans who believe he is the greatest of all time and can do no wrong, and you have the critics who think he's a crybaby who complains too much. The truth is far more nuanced. This is a man who has won over 100 races. He has seen what a perfect race operation looks like. He has lived it. He has benefited from it. When he comes to a team that is still figuring it out, he's going to point out the flaws. That's his job. That's why they hired him. They didn't hire him to be a quiet passenger. They hired him to be a catalyst for change. The radio messages, as awkward as they are part of that process. They're the sound of a champion pushing a team to meet his standards. So where does this leave us? The dust has settled on the Dutch Grand Prix, but the implications are rippling through the paddock. Lewis Hamilton asked for better execution. He didn't get it. He expressed his frustration. He apologized for the tone, but not the content. This is a story about a team in transition, a driver in pursuit of perfection, and the agonizing gap between potential and performance. It's a story that tells us more about the psychology of Formula One than 100 lap charts ever could. We have to look at the immediate future. The next race is always the most important one in this sport. The teams are packing up, heading to the next destination. The engineers will look at the data from the new floor. They will be pleased with the pace. The strategists will review the radio calls. They will have meetings. They will talk about synergy and workflow. But the fundamental question remains, can they fix the human element? Can they teach a pit wall to be decisive under pressure? Can they balance the need for secrecy with the need to keep their drivers informed? The buoyed-up feeling he described at the start of the weekend is still there. The belief is still there. The performance is there. But the execution is not. Until Ferrari closes that gap, they will remain a team of almost and what if. They will remain a team that looks fast on Friday, decent on Saturday, and confused on Sunday. Lewis Hamilton didn't ask for a faster car. He asked for a better brain. He asked for the team to think clearly when the pressure is highest. That request went unanswered at Zandvoort. The real story is whether they can answer it in the weeks to come. The fight, as Lewis said, is absolutely still on. The only question is whether the team is ready to fight alongside him.